Hi everyone, please stay with us to the end. We are going to talk a little bit at the end of the video about where we're going to go next with this channel. Hi everyone, Nadine Wellwood. I guess your post candidate for the People's Party of Canada. Just wanted to give everybody a little bit of an update on what's been going on the last week and sort of some post-election thoughts. Have had people obviously ask me about the result, and I would be lying if I said that I wasn't disappointed. I would say almost a little bit shocked actually with the result. I certainly felt that the communications, the conversations that I had with people, especially at the doors and one-on-one, that we did win over quite a few people. I know there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear, and obviously that was certainly reflected in the numbers. 62,000 houses was a lot of houses to get to for me personally to have a conversation with people one-on-one. So I think the 2,651 votes that I actually got were votes that I must have actually, and I do believe people that I actually have spoken with. So thank you for those who did actually vote. And, you know, for those of you who woke up to the result, I think a lot of people were surprised. One of the biggest things for me on the evening of was not only just watching the results as they came in, when I looked at the end result and saw PPC 0 and everything to the left of that, because I honestly believe that the People's Party was the only party that offered a truly conservative, more center kind of option for people. So seeing everything and all the results that came in to the left of that, it left me thinking, is conservative dead? Is it a dead concept? Are the conservative values relative anymore? And I know there's been talk of 65 million new immigrants coming to Canada, the majority of which would reside in and around our larger centers, namely the Greater Toronto Area, Vancouver, Montreal. And if that is indeed the case, I don't see conservatism and conservative values surviving. I think they're gone as people in urban centers, because if you look at the difference between the rural and the urban, we can see such a differential as far as how people vote, and that sense of independence and responsibility right now resides mostly in the rural areas, not in our urban centers. And so that's probably one of the biggest question marks for me right now is does conservative have a place in our future here in Canada? So the question that was posed is the majority of the Western provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan basically, voted conservative. I think the Conservative Party of Canada, though, and a part of the big reason why they didn't do as well in other parts of the country was because they weren't clear on what they actually stood for. And I think in Alberta and Saskatchewan, they voted conservative because that's what they always do. They're blue. And they voted not so much even in this particular case for a leader, because I don't know how many times I heard I held my nose and voted for Scheer. Nobody seemed to favor Scheer as a leader, but they still voted conservative because it was a fear vote. It was, we had to get rid of Justin Trudeau. So when people talk about conservative, I don't believe that the Conservative Party of Canada is conservative. I think they left and abandoned many of their values, which I think cost them in the long run. In some of the more eastern provinces that might have tended to vote a little bit stronger if they had a stronger leader. But, you know, when we talk about is the Conservative Party conservative, as of today, no, they're not in my opinion. Another question has been, about the People's Party, and obviously in light of Warren Kinsella and the Daisy Group, whether or not we got a fair opportunity to present. And politics, it seems, can certainly bring out the worst of some people. And I think politics gets used to justify a lot of bad behavior. The Kinsella Situation, I know I have had conversations with people where, oh, Nadine, it's not uncommon for political parties to do opposition research. This was not opposition research. This was sabotage. This was a targeted, bought and paid for by the Conservative Party of Canada, supposedly, to seek and destroy an individual and the party. It's one thing to go and people who are naturally attracted to a party, to go and do some research on them, understand who they are, what can you dig up on them. But this was beyond that. This, to me, if you look about what happened in Winnipeg, an entire EDA, were they put there? Were some of these people planted intentionally? And I think there was definitely some sense of sabotage, discrediting individuals, making the party come across as racist, white supremacist, which is so totally not true. Anybody who has looked at any of our policies, any of our platform, any of our candidates for the most part, and every candidate, every party, my goodness, let's take a look at the Liberal Party. The Prime Minister had brown face, black face. How much more racist, supposedly, outward, openly is that? And I don't believe that Justin Trudeau was racist at all. I think he was foolish. People make mistakes. And I think that's the thing that we need to start looking at is we need to start doing politics differently, because we have politicians that are supposedly held to a standard of perfection, which I haven't met a perfect human being yet. So we need to redefine how we do politics and stop looking back 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago into a person's past and history to dig up. For one, what was acceptable 30 years ago, no, was not acceptable today. But 30 years ago, it was probably very commonplace. So we have to start reevaluating how we do politics in this country. So the question posed is about election, I think, interference. So I think what happened with Kinsella is they had a social media campaign. They also had other things obviously going on that were spreading a picture or painting a picture that didn't exist of a political party. That is definitely interference. And whether or not it was foreign interference or whether or not it's domestic interference, I think is somewhat irrelevant. Anybody, foreign or otherwise, domestic or otherwise, that interferes in people's right to make an informed decision based upon factual information, not hearsay, and especially something fabricated, a campaign that was bought and paid for to deliberately smear or slander a party. I think those should be punishable offenses, in my opinion, in Canada. Not only has it hurt the media's reputation, because who do we trust? It's hurt our political reputation, because again, now who do you trust? And we don't trust anybody, I don't think, politically. And now we obviously don't trust people socially, on social media or other forms of media. For me, one of the biggest disgraces of this entire campaign has been the national media. The lack of coverage, omitting an option is just as bad as smearing an option. And they did a very good job at both of those when it came to the People's Party of Canada. And it's their prerogative to do so. But when you're a media source, that just creates, I think, a lack of trust now moving forward with your audience. And the media needs to have the audience that they're presenting to at least trust that the information that they're presenting is accurate, factual, and that's gone, I think, in Canada as well. We had a question about whether or not, I personally felt I was impacted. And of course I was, because being a part of the party, I think it has an impact on the result. 3.5% or 2,651 votes. I think we certainly would have had a larger number had we had the opportunity to present ourselves without the smear campaigns and without the doubt in people's mind, that it was racist or anti-immigrant, all of those things. Those things had a result on the election result. And the election result has an impact on me personally for a number of things. There's a certain number of rules around election campaigns. For example, when you put money into something, especially your own effort and money, if you win 10% of the vote, then you get 60% of your expenses reimbursed. At least that gets you started on the next campaign or the next option, helps to cover some of the costs that you personally put into it. For this time around as well. So there is impacts, some of them financial, some of them reputation. I had one gentleman who I had to block finally on social media because it was just becoming harassment. And for the most part, it was about the party. And then it turned to me, calling me a racist. Well, I'm not a racist. Farthest thing from. And so when it turned to me personally, that's kind of when I went, okay, enough's enough. And I had to block the individual because, obviously this information is inaccurate. The person hasn't done any of their own homework or due diligence. So, reputational wise, me personally, I think, has it impacted me on a greater scale? Probably not, because I think anybody who's spoken to me, anybody who knows me, knows the difference. But I think maybe to the general public, maybe, I don't know, but there's certainly some financial impact as well. So I think some of the biggest lessons learned, I think it's harder for people to change than they think. We saw that, I think, in the result. People voted here for the color blue and for a party. They didn't vote for a leader because most people didn't necessarily like, I think, or felt that Andrew Scheer was the strongest or the best option, but they still voted for the Conservative Party. So one of the biggest lessons learned for me is if you're running for politics, the candidate is irrelevant, or at least almost irrelevant. I think the votes that I did get, I think were votes that were votes for me and for the party or people who may have known Max as a leader. But we have a prime minister, we have leaders of parties, and it seems pretty obvious at this stage to me that they're not there based upon their qualifications. So if I go in and I sit down in a business interview for a position, they're looking at the skill set. They're looking at what I bring to the position as far as a person, character, skills, ability, all of those things. And that seems to somehow be missing in our political system because Andrew Scheer has no job experience. He was the Speaker of the House, sure, but he left school directly and went into a job for government, and he has no relevant skills, no economics background, no business skill, no experience is probably the biggest one. And we look at our Prime Minister, he's there on a name alone. He got elected on the fact that his father was the past Prime Minister years ago. The Trudeau name held some weight. But again, if you look at his actual experience, and yet we have the private running of a country is no different than running of a business. and we don't have people with qualifications to run business, or people who have experience running businesses and they're running the country. So that was probably my biggest lesson learned, is that people are going to vote based upon the leader and a party. The candidate probably has very little to do with it. Somebody asked me whether or not I felt that candidates were needed, and my honest opinion at this particular point in time is no. People voted on a leader, they voted on a color, a party. They didn't vote for a candidate. So why do we need candidates at all? Maybe the American system, where people put you vote for the leader, you vote for the president, you vote for the prime minister. Maybe that's more effective and more forthright. So would I do it again? I think this was one of the probably the best experience I have ever had in my life. The lessons I've learned, the things I've learned, to have experienced being a candidate and politics from the inside, at least from the candidate side, and having seen the process through from start to finish, has probably been one of the best experiences of my life. The people I've met, the passion, the conviction, the commitment, the volunteers that it takes to run something like this. So all of that combined, and getting to know my community. So I have gotten to meet so many people in my community, both politically, just citizens, business leaders. That is an experience that, in my opinion, that has been invaluable. And would I do it again? Probably. I would probably get suckered into doing this again, just because it was such a great experience. And even though the result didn't reflect it, I think there was a lot more support than was reflected in the numbers. Where to from here? That's a good question. I don't know. Alberta's threatening separation, which I don't think is a logical place to go at this stage. There's a lot of talk, a lot of emotion. People are upset. But of all the groups that you look at that are talking about this, there's no rationale. There's no plan. There's no one that really has the ability at this stage to champion it and to be that rational voice to give it any real substance. So is that a reality? I don't think so at this stage. But having said that, does Alberta need a new relationship with Canada? Absolutely. We either need major electoral reform that gives us a voice at the table in Ottawa, because if let's say we do have 65 million new immigrants that move to this country, and they center around those major cities, those major urban areas, Alberta will never have a voice. Neither will Saskatchewan or Manitoba, neither will BC. So we do need major electoral reform. How is that going to happen? So either we find someone who will champion and truly dig into the steps necessary for Alberta to separate, or the province has to truly step up to the plate, and that means our Prime Minister, our MLAs, maybe we need an advocacy group, a lobby group that can assist them in federally in Ottawa, and push to reassert provincial jurisdiction. Because the provinces have a lot of power that they've given up to the federal government over the years. And the one big one for me that I've realized in going into some of the schools in particular, education. I went into some of the high schools, and the conversation was very different than the conversations that I had, let's say, with the grade 6 and the junior middle schools. The junior middle schools, actually, there's room there to have conversation about what the role of government is. They're not indoctrinated so much into what a prefixed concept. And they were certainly more open and more free to voice an opinion and listen to different ideas. The high school kids that I talked to were interesting because there was certainly more indoctrination into an already preconceived thought of what government should be doing. And it was very idealistic, far more socialist. And I think if Alberta, independence, freedom, these concepts are going to survive in the future, we need to start now re-educating some of our youth to the concepts of capitalism and get away from what they're being indoctrinated into and socialism. We have the country we have because of capitalism. Now, we haven't had true capitalism in Canada in a very long time, and I'm talking many decades. It hasn't existed here. Corporate welfare and the amount of money that the government pays out to corporations through corporate welfare and subsidies is a perfect example of that. There's more corruption, I think, in our government than people want to openly admit. One of the biggest disappointments of this entire election has probably had to have been nobody wanted to have debate or conversation on the real issues. We talked about affordable housing. It's not federal jurisdiction. We talked about issues that federally people got voted in on, and realistically, they're not the federal government's mandate. The federal government has a mandate, in my opinion, to protect individual freedoms and civil liberties. It has a mandate to protect our borders, so immigration certainly. It had a mandate for fiscal responsibility, and those two of them in particular certainly were not discussed at all. And one got discussed only from a perspective of, being used against this party as an anti-immigration platform. And there was no real debate or real discussion on, I think, the real issues. For example, freedom of speech was another one. We were the only party talking about that. And we are at serious risk of losing our civil liberties and our freedom to have real conversation and hard conversations about real issues. So that was a big disappointment for me. People, get elected on promises, and I think people don't understand economics and the proper role of government well enough anymore. And I think that's where our education needs to be influenced again, so that people understand there is no such thing as a free lunch. If somebody is making you a promise and they're telling you that you don't have to pay for it, you're being lied to, because the bill comes to someone in some way, in some shape, in some form. And if the government is the people, then who's paying? If you're paying and someone's making $1 billion promise to you today, then you're paying for it either now or tomorrow, and in one way, shape, or form. So to make a promise without having a fiscal plan, I think is irresponsible of government. And I think government just is making promises that they can't keep, and those are lies. And so for me, we need to change that. A question came up as a result of Ankana and its departure from Canada. Having an economics background, having some understanding of finance, this, I think, is the start of what we're going to see more of in Canada. Canada is not a friendly place right now to business, period. And it is certainly not a friendly place for investment, and investors are not looking to invest in Canadian opportunity right now. So I think Canada as a whole, at least in the West, we are in some dire situations, and things do need to change for us. Economically, and it's not just about fiscal responsibility, it's about regulation. We have such an overburdened regulatory system right now on business. It's just very, very difficult for Canadians to do business here, let alone to attract international opportunities to do business. Our tax structure is such that Canada has proven itself again, time and time again, that we are not friendly to business. You go back and you watch some of the videos on the debates, some of the things the NDP said as it related to business. It just, all of those things add up and they detract from investment coming to Canada. So where do we want to take this channel from here? It appears that some people are interested in what I have to say. So one of the things I think we may do is to continue on with the channel in a number of different areas. One is I would love to focus a little bit more on the economics and education. And I think we're going to do some videos around, understanding economics 101, the proper role of government, very basic, easy to understand opportunities for people to kind of tune in and hear what we have to say on that. So to give you an example of one of the videos I think I'd like to do is there's a great book. It's 80 pages long. You can read it. And it was written by an old French economist named Frédéric Bastiat, B-A-S-T-I-A-T. And one of the things that I'm thinking to do, the book is called The Law. And one of my ideas is to read excerpts, very condensed, of the book, make them relevant to particular areas today, and present that in such a way that it would give you an idea as to what the book is about, a little bit of commentary, how it's relevant, and give you an opportunity then to just ask your questions for future and further more in-depth discussion around some of the concepts that are drawn out as a result of that video clip. The other one I think is going to be maybe more some of the political rants. One of the ones that we did on political corruption seemed to be quite popular, and we'll probably continue to do something on that side as well. So we're still working out some of the details, but stay tuned. I want to thank everybody for all the support, for tuning in, for listening, for their comments, their feedback. And I would ask that if you have ideas, if you have questions, if you have thoughts that you'd like to share, please send them to us, because we have such tremendous flexibility as to where we could take this and what we do with it from here. And I'd love for you to be the one to drive the content. So please do share your thoughts, your comments, your ideas, and let us know. So if you'd like to follow along, don't forget to subscribe, make sure you like, and hit the notification button. Thanks, everyone.